10 days before Thanksgiving, I found out my daughter was planning to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. I stood there, staring at the message on my phone, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. My hands shook as I scrolled, each word cutting deeper than the last. This wasn't a stranger. This was my own daughter. And in that moment, I realized Thanksgiving wasn't going to be a celebration this year. It was going to be war.
I always thought betrayal came from outsiders, strangers, colleagues, people who owed you nothing. But I was wrong. Sometimes betrayal comes from the people who share your blood, the ones you've sacrificed everything for, the ones you defend even when the world turns against them. It started 10 days before Thanksgiving. I remember because the air had that cold, metallic bite that always came before the holidays in our town. The trees outside had lost their color, and my driveway was blanketed in brittle leaves that crackled beneath every step. I'd been preparing for the holiday like always, buying the turkey, checking recipes, and texting my daughter, Grace, about what she wanted to bring for dessert. Grace had been distant lately, colder somehow. She used to call me every evening just to tell me about her day, but over the past few months, her messages had grown shorter. One-word replies, delayed responses, excuses about being busy with work or her fiancé's family. I told myself it was normal, that she was growing up, that she had her own life now. But deep down, a quiet unease was building, like a whisper I couldn't quite make out. That whisper became a scream the night I accidentally found the message. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when my phone buzzed. It wasn't mine, actually. It was Grace's old phone. She had left it at my house months ago, after upgrading, and I kept forgetting to wipe it. Out of habit, I picked it up to plug it in. That's when I saw it, a notification on the lock screen. It was a group chat. The name stopped me cold. Thanksgiving, revenge. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke, a meme group or something harmless, but when I tapped it open, my stomach dropped. There were messages from Grace, my Grace. She was talking about me. She always plays the victim. I'll finally show everyone what she's really like. Dad warned me, but she deserves it. I froze. My throat went dry. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I scrolled, desperate to believe I was misunderstanding, that it was out of context, but it wasn't. Each message made the truth clearer. She was planning something for Thanksgiving, something cruel, something meant to destroy me in front of family and friends. I read until I couldn't anymore. The words blurred through tears. Grace wasn't alone. Her fiancé, Ethan, was in on it too. So was my ex-husband, Robert, the man who left me after 20 years of marriage, the man who had poisoned Grace's mind against me for years.
They were planning to turn Thanksgiving into a public ambush. I sat at the kitchen table for what felt like hours, staring at that phone, feeling the weight of every memory pressing down on me. Her first steps, her graduation, every time I defended her when people said she was spoiled or selfish. I had done everything to protect her, and now she wanted to humiliate me.
That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat there, the phone glowing in my lap, the words echoing over and over in my head. She deserves it. By dawn, I made a decision. If Grace wanted war, I would give her one. But I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't fight. I'd let her walk right into her own trap and show her that mothers might bend, but they don't break. For the next few days, I went through the motions like nothing had happened. On the surface, I was just another mother preparing for Thanksgiving, cleaning the house, marinating the turkey, setting out the good china I hadn't used since Grace moved out. But underneath the calm, I was watching, listening, planning. I'd spent my entire life trying to keep peace in a family that thrived on control. Robert had been charming when we first met, brilliant, persuasive, the kind of man who made you feel like sunlight just by standing near him. But that shine dimmed after marriage. Slowly, his words began cutting deeper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His weapon was doubt. He made me question my memory, my decisions, my worth. And when he left, he didn't just take half the house. He took Grace's trust with him. So when I saw his name in that group chat, it all made sense. The manipulation hadn't stopped when the papers were signed. It had only evolved. I told myself I wouldn't react. Not yet. If I wanted to survive this and make them regret it, I needed to stay quiet. Let them believe they were in control. I began replaying old memories, looking for patterns. How many times had Grace repeated Robert's phrases without realizing it? How many times had Ethan, her fiancé, parroted things he couldn't possibly know unless Robert told him? They thought I was blind. They mistook kindness for weakness. That would be their mistake. I remember the evening Grace called to check in. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the way it used to be when she wanted something. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to make sure we're still good for next Thursday." I could almost hear Ethan coaching her in the background. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, matching her tone. "Everything's ready. I can't wait to see you both." When I hung up, my reflection in the kitchen window startled me. Calm, smiling, but with eyes that looked sharper than they had in years. It had been a long time I'd seen that version of myself, the one who didn't cry, the one who planned. The next morning, I called my lawyer. There's something Robert didn't know.
After our divorce, I'd quietly invested the alimony in property and stocks under my maiden name. What he believed was my modest living was actually built on a foundation he could never touch. I told my lawyer to prepare a few documents, nothing dramatic, just enough to make sure everything was sealed and protected before the holidays. If they wanted to humiliate me, fine. But when the dust settled, they'd realize I had stripped their leverage months before they even began plotting. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, the tension became a physical presence in the house. Every night, I replayed their words from that chat in my mind. She always plays the victim. We'll make her admit everything. Dad said it's time. Time for what? That question kept me awake for nights. What did Robert mean? What was he planning to make me admit? Then I found out. 2 days before Thanksgiving, a delivery truck pulled up outside. I hadn't ordered anything. The driver handed me a long, flat box, the kind used for posters or signs. My heart sank as I opened it. Inside was a banner. It read, "Family Truth Night, hosted by Grace and Ethan." I just stood there, holding that banner, the world tilting beneath me. So this was it, their plan. They were going to turn Thanksgiving into a public trial. But as the shock faded, something else replaced it, a smile. Because they had just made their biggest mistake. They told me when and where they'd attack, and that meant I could strike first. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window and whispered, "Let's make this a dinner they'll never forget." In the morning after that argument, it felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your chest, making every breath feel like a confession. The air in the house was heavy with something I couldn't name, like dust stirred after years of pretending everything was fine. I stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, staring out the window at the pale November sky. The trees were bare now, their branches thin and skeletal against the gray. 10 days until Thanksgiving. 10 days until the dinner my daughter was planning, the one she thought would humiliate me. The words I'd overheard still burned in my mind. "She'll see what happens when you treat people like that." She didn't know I'd heard. She didn't know that every whisper between her and her aunt, every smirk at family gatherings, had started to sound different now, like a secret rehearsed too many times. But here's the thing. I wasn't broken, not yet. I'd been underestimated before, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone make a spectacle of me, not in front of family, not in front of strangers, and definitely not in front of her. That day I started paying attention in a way I never had before. Every text she sent, every phone call that dropped into silence when I entered the room, Every visit from her aunt, with that too sweet tone and the bags she didn't let me see inside, they were planning something, and I wasn't going to sit and wait for it. I began writing notes in a small leather journal. Dates, phrases, moments. I had learned that memory was only as strong as proof, and if they wanted a scene, they were going to find out that I knew how to control one better than they ever could. That evening, I called my friend Clara, the only person who had seen me through the worst years of my life. She listened quietly as I told her everything. When I was done, she said softly, "You can't confront them yet. Not until you're sure. Not until you know what they're holding." She was right. Confrontation too early was emotion. Timing was power. So I waited. I let them think I was slipping, that I was tired, distracted. I started leaving small hints of vulnerability, letting them see what they wanted to see. A shaky hand, a misplaced key, a question I already knew the answer to. It was a performance, and they were the perfect audience. But beneath it all, I was watching. I noticed how my daughter started asking about the will, casually at first, then more directly. How my sister began dropping by more often, her tone wrapped in pity, her words lined with warning. "You shouldn't host Thanksgiving this year. It's too much work for you, don't you think?" Too much work. That was the phrase she used when she wanted to take control. I smiled through every conversation, nodding, pretending to agree. But inside, I was cataloging every sentence, every slip. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was from my lawyer, one I hadn't spoken to in years. He said, "Your daughter called last week asking about your estate plan. I assumed you were updating it, but now I realized she might be fishing." My heart sank, not from shock, but from recognition. It all connected now. The dinner, the whispers, the strange politeness. They weren't just planning to embarrass me. They wanted to take something. My control, my dignity, maybe even the home that had been mine for 3 decades. And suddenly, the dinner wasn't a threat anymore. It was an opportunity. I thanked him, told him not to worry, and hung up. Then I sat back in my chair and let out a laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. They thought they were building a trap, but they'd forgotten. I'd built this house. Over the next few days, I set things in motion. I called Clara again and told her I needed help arranging something for Thanksgiving night. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'll handle it." I reached out to a few old friends who owed me favors, people who knew discretion, people who could get things done quietly. Background checks, documents, photos. It wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. And the more I learned, the clearer the picture became. My daughter wasn't working alone. My sister had been helping her reach out to a journalist, a local gossip columnist who thrived on family exposés. So that was the plan, a public story, to make me look cruel, controlling, and broken, all to justify taking what was mine. But the beauty of arrogance is how blind people makes them. They'd forgotten that I knew how to survive storms far worse than family scheming. The night before Thanksgiving, I sat alone in the living room. The house was spotless, candles set, table arranged with the silverware Helen, my late mother, had given me. Every piece gleamed like armor. I could feel it in the air, that electric stillness before everything breaks. They thought they were walking into my downfall. They didn't realize they were stepping into my stage. But even as I planned, I didn't know the full extent of their cruelty. Because what happened that night wasn't just betrayal, it was revelation. The day of Thanksgiving arrived with a deceptive calm. The kind of morning where the world feels fragile, too still, too polite, as if holding its breath for something it knows is coming. The house looked perfect. The smell of roasted turkey filled the air, mixed with cinnamon and the faint trace of my late husband's cologne that still lingered in the furniture after all these years. The table was immaculate, polished oak, candlelight reflected in each glass, silver cutlery arranged in perfect symmetry. But underneath all that beauty was tension. I could feel it humming through the walls like static. Every clock tick sounded louder. Every footstep on the hard wood felt heavy. They were coming. When my daughter arrived, she was dressed in soft beige, pearls around her neck, innocent, calculated perfection. She hugged me, lightly, carefully. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Behind her came my sister, wearing that same pitying expression she'd perfected over the years. Her eyes scanned the house, judging, assessing, as though she were already imagining it belonging to someone else. Then they came the others, cousins, family friends, all carrying polite smiles and small gifts, but what they really brought was curiosity. They were here to see something. I knew it, the moment I saw how their gazes lingered on me, as if I were the main event. Dinner began in quiet politeness, laughter that didn't feel real, compliments that came too quickly. I moved between the kitchen and the table, refilling glasses, serving food, playing the role they expected. But inside, I was listening, watching. Every word, every shift in tone, every sideways glance between my daughter and my sister. I could almost hear the rhythm of their plan. And then, the first note played. "So, Mom," my daughter began, her fork tapping softly against her plate. Her voice was sweet, but there was an undertone, a deliberate choice of words. I smiled, pretending not to notice. "I've been doing just fine, dear. Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason," she said, shrugging. It's a lot to handle at your age. The house, the bills, the stress. I just worry, you know?" A murmur rippled across the table. Subtle, but I heard it. Concerned glances, a few pitying smiles. That was her opening act. Then my sister joined in. "She's right," she said, cutting into her food. "You've been through so much. Maybe it's time to let people help you. You don't need to do everything alone anymore." The air thickened. The room suddenly felt too small. I put down my fork slowly. "Help me," I asked, keeping my tone light.
Yes, she said gently, like with decisions, financial things. The house. You shouldn't have to worry about all that. There it was, the script, perfectly rehearsed. I glanced around the table, catching the subtle nods, the knowing smiles. This wasn't concern. It was the unveiling of their performance, and I was their chosen subject. I could feel my pulse rise, but I kept my expression calm. If they wanted a show, they would get one, just not the one they expected. My daughter leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering just enough to sound intimate. Actually, Mom, I was thinking we could make things official. I've already spoken to an advisor. It'd just be easier if I helped manage your accounts, your home, even your medical stuff. Her words landed like tiny knives, polite, surgical, lethal. And why would you need to do that? I asked, my voice steady. She hesitated, just for a moment. I saw it, that flicker of guilt, but it was gone as quickly as it came. It's just safer this way. You forget things sometimes. I don't want anything to happen to you. There it was again, that soft cruelty disguised as care. I looked directly at her. You mean you don't want anything to happen to you? The table froze. Forks stopped mid-air. The air snapped like a taut string. She blinked, pretending not to understand. What do you mean? I smiled. You've been talking to my lawyer, haven't you? Her face went pale. For the first time that evening, the mask cracked. Across the table, my sister stiffened. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off with a raised hand. Don't, I said quietly. Not tonight. A silence followed, sharp and suffocating. I stood slowly, my chair sliding back with a low scrape. Then I reached under the table and pulled out a small black folder. I placed it on the tablecloth like a verdict. Inside were copies of every message, every recorded call, every note from the past 10 days. I told you once that this house was built on family, but it seems some of us forgot what that means. My daughter looked at the folder, then back at me, her voice trembling. You were spying on me. No, I was listening. The same way a mother listens when her daughter plots against her. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. My sister's hand shook slightly as she reached for her glass.
I leaned forward, my tone calm but cold. I know about the journalist, the story you planned to sell, the photos you wanted to leak, the narrative you wanted to write about your poor, unstable mother who lost control. Gasps around the table. A cousin dropped his fork. Someone whispered my name. But here's the thing, I continued. You underestimated me. You always have. You thought you could use my silence as weakness. But silence, my dear, is just strategy. I could feel the shift, power reclaiming its place, the narrative they tried to steal snapping back into my hands. My daughter tried to speak again, but I stopped her. You wanted to humiliate me? You planned this whole dinner for that? Well, congratulations. Everyone's watching. Let's give them something real to talk about. And then I opened the folder. One by one, I read excerpts aloud, snippets of texts between her and my sister, plans for the article, mentions of inheritance, even lines rehearsing tonight's concerned intervention. Every word hit like thunder in the quiet room. By the time I finished, she was trembling. Tears clung to her lashes, but her pride kept her from letting them fall. I looked at her for a long moment and said, softly but firmly, "Family isn't about taking what you think you deserve. It's about remembering who built the table you're sitting at." Then I sat down again, picked up my fork, and began eating as if nothing had happened. The silence that followed was heavy, like ash after a fire. No one spoke, no one moved. Even the candles seemed to burn quieter. Transition to part 5 of 8. The aftermath, the price of truth. When the last guest left and the front door clicked shut, silence filled the house again. But this time, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like strategy. The kind of silence that hums with consequence. The echo of that dinner still played in my mind. The gasps, the shifting eyes, the truth dropping like glass shattering across the table. My daughter's face frozen between guilt and fury. My sister's trembling hands clutching her napkin as if it could save her. And me sitting there, calm, deliberate, steady. They'd expected me to break. Instead, I had taken control of their chaos and turned it into my weapon.
But I knew one thing for certain. Public humiliation, even when deserved, is never the end. It's just the opening move. The next morning, I woke to find my phone flooded with messages. Family members, neighbors, even acquaintances who hadn't spoken to me in years. Everyone wanted to check in. Some called to offer sympathy, others thinly veiled curiosity. But beneath every message was the same question. What really happened? I didn't answer. Silence was more powerful than any explanation. Let them guess. Let the rumor mill grind. Instead, I poured myself a coffee and called my lawyer. I said, "Freeze everything." He paused. "Everything?" "Yes, every joint account, every trust, every access point my daughter or sister ever had." He hesitated again, then sighed. "You're serious?" "I've never been clearer," I replied. Within hours, their financial privileges were gone. The credit cards, the auto-pay links, the shared investments, all sealed. For years, they'd used convenience as camouflage for control. Now every penny returned to my name. It wasn't about money. It was about message. By evening,
My phone rang again. This time, it was her. "Mom," she started, her voice shaking. "What did you do? My card's declined. My rent." I didn't interrupt. I let her panic bloom in real time. "Mom, this isn't fair. You're punishing me because you're embarrassed." Embarrassed. The word hung in the air like a spark looking for something to burn. I said quietly, "No, dear. I'm teaching you what it feels like to take something for granted." She went silent. I could hear her breath hitch. I continued. "You thought my life was something you could rewrite for your entertainment. Now you can live with the version you created." And then, softly, I hung up. Over the next few days, I moved methodically, one quiet decision after another. I contacted the board of the charity she volunteered with, the same one she had used to posture her false kindness. I let them know about her family tensions, how she might need a little time to sort things out. The board was sympathetic, but wary of drama. Within a week, she was quietly removed from public-facing duties. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it to pull away the mask. And as for my sister, the one who had encouraged the whole scheme, I paid her a visit. She opened the door looking tired, mascara smudged, her arrogance cracked. "You shouldn't be here," she said immediately. "Oh, but I should," I replied, stepping inside. The house smelt of stale wine and regret. She tried to offer excuses, but I stopped her. "You told my daughter to expose me. You told her that family loyalty is weakness. You forgot where you learned that line." Her lips trembled. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "You wanted control, and when you couldn't have it, you tried to destroy me. But now you'll live with what you built." I leaned closer, my tone calm and precise. "I've transferred your loan payments back to your account, effective immediately. Don't worry, I made sure the bank knows it was your decision." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that." I just did. For the first time in years, she looked small. When I left her house, the air outside felt different, cleaner. The night was cold, sharp with purpose. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of family betrayal. I felt like its reckoning.
But revenge, when done right, isn't rage. It's control. And control needs patience. I didn't brag, I didn't explain. I simply started living well, intentionally. I joined the local art council again, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected, donated anonymously to causes I cared about. My absence from their drama became louder than any confrontation could have been. They tried to bait me. Angry texts, tearful voicemails, even mutual acquaintances sent to mediate. I ignored them all.
Every unanswered call reminded them that access is earned, not inherited. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, I received a letter, handwritten, trembling ink. It was from my daughter. She wrote, "I thought I was teaching you a lesson, but it turns out I was trying to hurt you for things I didn't understand. You never fought me the way I expected. You just took everything back. And now I don't even know who I am without your forgiveness." I read it 3 times before folding it neatly and placing it in the drawer beside my bed. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give on demand. It had to be earned the way I had earned peace, through silence, patience, and consequence. That night I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, the city lights flickering like distant fires. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even vindictive. I was just free. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about destruction. It was about restoration. It was about standing in the ashes of what was taken from you and realizing you didn't need to rebuild the same house. You could build something stronger. But stories like mine don't end with peace. They circle back. Because just when I thought it was over, someone unexpected came knocking. And this time, the past wasn't asking for forgiveness. It was demanding payment. It had been weeks since I'd heard a single word from my daughter or my sister. The silence had become something I wore like a coat, heavy but protective. Life had started to feel like mine again. I spent my mornings walking the garden, trimming the roses that had survived the frost. The air had that crisp winter bite that wakes you up and reminds you that you're still alive. And then one quiet afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the polite, hesitant kind. It was firm, deliberate. For a moment I didn't move. My first thought was that it might be my daughter, finally deciding to face me. But something in that rhythm, 3 short knocks, 1 long, felt practiced, professional. I opened the door to find a man standing there in a gray overcoat, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. Late 40s, maybe 50s. Polished, too polished. His eyes flicked across me like a scanner. "Mrs. Alden?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "Who's asking?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My name's Daniel Rourke. I'm a journalist." There it was, the word I'd been expecting for months. "I think you might want to hear what I've found," he said, his tone calm, confident, as if he already knew I wouldn't turn him away. I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside and motioned him in. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the same table where my family's illusion had shattered. Daniel laid a folder in front of him and opened it with care, revealing photographs, documents, and handwritten notes. He began slowly, choosing each word like a blade. "Your daughter and your sister approached me 6 months ago. They wanted me to write a piece, an exposé on you, a story about a controlling mother and her perfect
facade. My stomach tightened, though I said nothing. He slid a photograph toward me, a blurred shot of my sister meeting with someone outside a hotel. They were being paid, Mrs. Alden, by a rival investor, someone your late husband worked with. The room seemed to tilt. Paid? I repeated. Daniel nodded. They weren't just planning a public humiliation. They were part of a financial setup. Your family ranch, your trust, even your private holdings. This investor wanted to push you into a scandal that would force a sale. He leaned back, his voice steady. Your daughter might have been manipulated, but your sister knew exactly what she was doing. For a long time, I said nothing. I stared at the folder, at the faces I loved, and the lies they'd sold. It wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration. Finally, I asked, "Why are you telling me this now?" Daniel hesitated, then sighed. Because when they realized I wouldn't publish the story, they turned on me. They tried to discredit my work. Someone broke into my apartment last month. Files gone. My editor told me to drop it. He met my eyes then, something like guilt flickering in his expression. I figured you should know who your enemies really were. And maybe I needed a witness if things got worse. A faint, bitter laugh escaped me. You want my protection. He didn't deny it. Let's just say we could help each other. That night, long after he left, I sat in the dark with the folders spread across my lap. The evidence was damning. Emails, payment transfers, a signed NDA with my sister's initials. I should have felt fury, but what I felt instead was precision. Cold, calculated clarity. They'd tried to ruin me for money and failed. Now, with this, I had enough to end them, both, in ways that would make them wish I'd chosen anger instead of strategy. I made 3 calls the next morning. The first was to my lawyer. I need to update my estate plan again, I told him, and I'd like to add some clauses. The second was to a journalist I actually trusted, an old friend from years ago who now ran her own investigative podcast. I have a story, I said. It's about betrayal, power, and greed, but it's mine to tell. The third call was to Daniel Rourke. If you're going to stand against them, I said, you're not doing it alone. He sounded relieved. Does that mean you'll go public? I said. Eventually. But first, I'm going to let them show their faces again. They'll come when the silence becomes too loud to bear. And I was right. A week later, my daughter called. Her tone was soft, hesitant. "Mom, can we talk?" I agreed to meet at a cafe near the park, neutral ground. When I arrived, she was already there, fidgeting with her cup, eyes red and tired. She looked up at me like a stranger seeking forgiveness from someone who owed her nothing. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "Aunt Elise told me it was harmless, that we were just setting the record straight. I didn't realize she was working with someone else." I watched her carefully. "You didn't think to ask why she was suddenly interested in my finances?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I wanted to believe her. I thought she was protecting me." "And who protected me?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. I leaned in, my voice firm. "You sold my trust for a headline. You helped strangers turn my grief into currency. And now you want redemption?" She shook her head, whispering, "I just want it to stop." "Oh, it will. But not because you asked." That night, Daniel sent me another message, a recording. It was my sister's voice, sharp and impatient. "If she doesn't take the bait, we'll push the story anyway. By the time she realizes what's happening, the damage will be done." I replayed it twice, then smiled. Every chess game ends the same way, when the player mistakes silence for surrender. The following week, I held a private charity dinner, smaller than the last one, more intimate, attended by people who mattered. I invited Daniel, my lawyer, a few influential figures from the local press, and of course, my family. When my sister walked in and saw Daniel at the table, her expression flickered from confusion to panic. She masked it quickly, but I saw the fear behind her smile. The meal began smoothly, polite conversation floating like harmless smoke. Then, halfway through, I stood up. "I'd like to make a small announcement." I tapped my glass. The room quieted. My sister froze. "I want to thank everyone who stood by me. And I'd also like to acknowledge those who tried to tear me down, for they taught me just how strong I've become." I turned toward her and laid the folder on the table. "This is the truth you tried to sell. Consider it returned to sender." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's recorder caught every second. When it was over, I didn't need to say another word. My sister left town 2 days later. The journalist who'd funded her scheme was exposed by Daniel's follow-up report. My daughter, well, she called crying again. But this time it wasn't manipulation. It was regret. And as for me, I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I simply sat on my porch one night, a cup of tea in hand, listening to the wind move through the bare trees. Revenge had never been about destruction. It had been about restoration, about balance. And now, for the first time, everything felt balanced again. But power has a strange way of echoing back. Because after every storm, there's always something left behind. And sometimes it's not victory you have to live with, but what it cost to win.
There's a moment after every storm when the world looks strangely clean, not peaceful, not healed, just stripped bare. That's what my life felt like in the weeks that followed. No noise, no calls, no pretenses, just quiet. People assumed I was recovering, that I needed space. They were half right. I wasn't recovering. I was recalibrating. Revenge doesn't bring chaos. It brings order. It removes what's unnecessary and exposes what's real. And when the pieces finally stopped moving, I saw everything for what it truly was: small, predictable, fragile. My sister vanished from the city. Rumor said she sold her house, maybe left the country. I didn't care. She'd always mistaken distance for escape, forgetting that guilt travels lighter than luggage. As for my daughter, she tried to rebuild. She sent letters at first, then emails, each one softer, more desperate than the last. I just want to understand. Maybe we can talk. I know I made mistakes. I read them all, never replied. Forgiveness, when given too easily, becomes a habit. I was done giving anything away. There's something people don't tell you about control. Once you taste it, it's addictive. It's not the power itself that hooks you. It's the silence that follows, the way people measure their words around you, the way they remember that you don't forget. I started noticing it everywhere, in conversations with acquaintances, in the careful tone of my lawyer, even in the polite hesitation of the people who once whispered behind my back. My name had shifted from gossip to warning. I didn't ask for fear, but I accepted it. It was the first honest currency I'd had in years. One afternoon, Daniel Rourke visited again. He looked different, a little thinner, a little worn, the kind of man who'd spent too long standing too close to fire. "You got what you wanted," he said quietly. "Did I?" I replied. He gave a short laugh, humorless. "Your sister's gone. The investors are under investigation. The stories everywhere. You won." I leaned back in my chair. Winning implies there was a game. He studied me, his eyes narrowing. "You don't even sound angry anymore." I said, "Anger is noise. Noise is for people who still care." He nodded slowly, almost in respect. "I think I finally understand why they couldn't beat you. Because they underestimated boredom. People like them thrive on reaction. Take that away, and they collapse." He smiled faintly, then stood. "Just promise me one thing. Don't lose yourself in this." I looked at him for a long time. I didn't lose myself. I found her. When he left, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt nothing at all. No satisfaction, no regret, just balance.
The winter deepened. The air grew sharp, the world smaller. I started new habits, quiet ones. I'd wake early, make black coffee, walk through the house in silence. The rooms felt different now, lighter, mine. Sometimes I'd stop at the mirror in the hallway, the one that used to bother me, because it showed the lines I tried to ignore. Now I studied them like evidence, proof that survival leaves marks, and that some scars are better seen than hidden. I wasn't proud of what I'd done. Pride is for people who need justification. I didn't. I did what was necessary. That's the truth about revenge. It doesn't heal. It doesn't redeem. It just corrects. A month later, I received one final letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was my daughter. "I've left the city. I'm working now, trying to rebuild. I know you won't reply, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what you were trying to teach me.
You were right. Love without respect is manipulation. I learned that the hard way. She ended it with this: I'm not asking for forgiveness anymore. I'm asking for peace. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the same drawer as all the others, and locked it, not out of anger, out of finality. She didn't need my words. She needed silence. Sometimes silence is mercy, disguised as consequence. People talk about closure as if it's something you find, like a misplaced key. They're wrong. Closure isn't found. It's built, one deliberate act at a time, until the door behind you no longer exists. And that's what I'd done. I'd built my own ending. No apologies, no reunions, no tidy resolution. Just a clean cut. Now when I walk through the house, I don't hear echoes of what used to be. I hear the hum of something steadier. Control, discipline, peace that doesn't require understanding. They wanted to destroy my name. I made it untouchable. They wanted me to break. I became unshakable. And in the end, when the ashes settled and the noise died down, the only truth that mattered was this: I hadn't lost anything worth keeping. But even now, when the world thinks the story is over, there's one final truth left unspoken. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't just end a war, it rewrites history.
Years have passed. Seasons have shifted so many times that even the garden has forgotten what it once looked like. The roses that used to bloom wild and untamed now grow in disciplined lines, trimmed, contained, deliberate, like everything else in my life. People still whisper about that year. They call it the family scandal, as if it were a storm that came and went. But storms don't vanish. They carve the land they touch. What they really mean is that they stopped looking for the wreckage. I didn't. I built something out of it. I live differently now. My days are quiet, my nights measured. I read more. I host small dinners, not with family, but with people who understand balance, people who speak softly and mean what they say. I've learned that trust is not about forgiveness, it's about control. You choose who gets near the fire. Every so often, I still receive letters, sometimes from my daughter, sometimes from strangers who think they know the story. I never respond, because that version of me, the one who needed to explain, is gone. She burned down with the illusions they tried to build around her. Truth is not. The truth is, power doesn't shout, it whispers, it waits, it moves through rooms like smoke, unseen but unescapable. And that's what I've become, a presence, not a plea. People assume revenge leaves you empty. They're wrong. It leaves you clear. It scrapes away everything that doesn't belong to you. Guilt, fear, hesitation, until all that's left is precision. I no longer wake up remembering the betrayal. I wake up remembering that I survived it without permission. And survival, on your own terms, is the purest victory there is. The journalist, Daniel, wrote a book later. I never read it. I didn't need to. He sent me a first edition with a single note on the inside cover. You taught me that truth is a weapon. Thank you for teaching me how to use it. I placed it on the shelf beside the family photographs, a relic, not a reminder. Because some stories don't end. They simply stop needing to be told.
I sometimes walk through the city and catch reflections of myself in shop windows. Older now, yes. Sharper, too. There's a stillness in my face that unnerves people. The kind that comes from knowing no one can touch what's yours anymore. I don't smile often, but when I do, it's not for warmth. It's for recognition. For the woman who built peace out of ash and didn't apologize for it. So, if anyone asks me what I learned, I tell them this. Don't chase revenge. Become it. Don't beg for respect. Command it. And never ever let the people who broke you decide when your story ends. And as the last light of day slips through the window, catching on the glass, I raise my cup to the quiet, my crown, and think of everything they lost trying to take what was never theirs. Because in the end, they tried to bury me, but they forgot. I was the soil. If my story made you feel something, subscribe. There's more truth and more reckoning coming.